Welcome to the Book in Brief. Today we explore Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, a powerful novel about love, freedom, and self-discovery. First published in 1937, the story follows Janie Crawford, a Black woman in the American South, as she searches for her voice through love, loss, and personal growth. Celebrated for its lyrical language and rich symbolism, the novel has become a cornerstone of African American literature. In this video, we'll summarize the story, highlight key themes, and explain why it remains so important today. Chapter 1: Janie's Return. The novel begins with Janie Crawford returning to Eatonville, alone and dressed in overalls. Her dramatic reappearance causes a stir among the townspeople, who gossip about her failed relationships and speculate about what happened to her husband, Tea Cake. Janie doesn't respond to their whispers and quietly walks to her old home. Phoebe Watson, her loyal friend, visits her later that evening, bringing food and comfort. She's eager to understand what Janie has been through. Janie welcomes her and says she's ready to share her story from the beginning, from her girlhood to the events that led her back home. The chapter sets a reflective tone, suggesting that this is Janie's story told on her own terms. Chapter 2: Nanny's Dream. Janie begins her story by recalling her upbringing. She was raised by her grandmother, Nanny, after her mother disappeared. Janie didn't realize she was Black until she saw a photo and compared herself to the white children she grew up with. Her innocent world changed when she experienced her first kiss beneath a pear tree, symbolizing her longing for love and harmony. Nanny catches her kissing a local boy and becomes alarmed. She worries that Janie will follow her mother's path of hardship and shame. Wanting to protect her, Nanny decides to marry Janie off quickly. Though Janie dreams of love, Nanny's focus is safety and respectability. The chapter explores the tension between youthful desire and generational fear. Chapter 3: Janie's First Marriage. Nanny arranges Janie's marriage to Logan Killix, an older farmer with land and stability. Though Janie hopes that love will grow after marriage, she quickly realizes it won't. On her wedding day, she feels empty and disillusioned. She confides in Nanny, expressing her confusion and sadness. Nanny, however, insists that love will come with time and that security matters more than romance. Not long after, Nanny dies, leaving Janie with unresolved feelings. As Janie settles into life with Logan, she becomes increasingly unhappy. Her dreams of love and fulfillment remain unmet, and she begins to question whether marriage without love is worth enduring. The chapter deepens Janie's internal struggle between duty and desire. Chapter 4: Enter Joe Starks. Time passes, and Janie's discontent with Logan Killix grows. He treats her more like a laborer than a partner, asking her to do physical farm work. Janie feels trapped in a loveless, joyless marriage. One day, a well-dressed and confident stranger named Joe Starks arrives in town. He charms Janie with his ambition and bold talk of building a new kind of Black town. Joe treats her with admiration and promises a better life. Janie is intrigued by his confidence and vision. When Logan threatens her over her disobedience, Janie seizes the moment and leaves with Joe. The chapter marks a turning point. Janie chooses change, hoping that Joe represents the love and adventure she has longed for. Chapter 5: Eatonville and New Beginnings. Janie and Joe Starks arrive in Eatonville, a small all-Black town still in its early stages. Joe is unimpressed by its lack of organization and quickly takes charge. Using his money and charisma, he buys land, opens a store, and gets himself elected as mayor. Janie becomes the mayor's wife, but Joe doesn't let her participate in town discussions or speak publicly. He expects her to remain quiet and dignified, fitting his image of respectability. Janie begins to feel silenced, realizing that Joe's promises of freedom have come with new forms of control. The town admires Joe's leadership, but Janie starts to question her place beside him. A new chapter begins, filled with power, but not yet with love. Chapter 6. The porch and the mule life in Eatonville settles into a rhythm. Much of the town's social life happens on the porch of Joe's store, where men gather to joke and debate. Janie watches, but rarely speaks, as Joe discourages her from joining the conversations. One day, Matt Bonner's mule becomes the center of town gossip. The animal is mistreated and mocked by locals. Joe, trying to appear noble, buys the mule and sets it free, gaining admiration. After the mule dies, the men hold a mock funeral, but Janie is not allowed to attend. The chapter highlights how Janie's voice is suppressed, even in moments meant to be lighthearted. The porch represents community, but Janie remains on its edge, longing for true connection. Chapter 7. Cracks in the marriage. Janie's silence begins to weigh heavily on her. Years of Joe's controlling behavior, silencing her, belittling her in public, have taken a toll. Though she once believed in Joe's dreams, she now sees the cost, her own identity and voice. In private moments, Janie reflects on her unhappiness and growing resentment. Joe continues to see her as a possession rather than a partner, focusing on appearances and status. One day, Janie looks at herself in the mirror and realizes how much time has passed and how little she has lived for herself. Though she says little out loud, her thoughts reveal a woman preparing to reclaim her independence. The emotional distance between them grows deeper. Chapter 8. Joe's decline. Joe Starks begins to age and weaken both physically and emotionally. He becomes more irritable and withdrawn, sensing that his power is fading. His relationship with Janie continues to deteriorate. After a heated argument in which Joe insults her appearance, Janie finally stands up for herself in front of others, striking back with words that wound his pride. Joe is humiliated and retreats from public life, isolating himself in a separate room. As his health declines, Janie visits him one last time. In their final conversation, she speaks honestly, expressing the pain of being silenced for so long. Joe dies shortly after, and Janie feels a mix of sadness and relief. She is free to begin again. Chapter 9. A taste of freedom. With Joe gone, Janie finally feels a sense of freedom. She removes the head rags he made her wear and lets her hair down, a powerful symbol of reclaiming herself. Though the town expects her to mourn publicly and remarry quickly, Janie rejects their expectations. She enjoys her solitude and begins to reflect on her life and desires. She visits her mother's grave, seeking closure for past wounds. Janie now sees how much of her life was shaped by others' choices, Nanny's fears, Joe's ambitions, and she resolves to live for herself. Though suitors approach, she's uninterested. For the first time, Janie is alone on her own terms, standing at the threshold of true self-discovery. Chapter 10. A Chance Encounter 1. Quiet afternoon, as Janie sits outside her store, a man named Virgil Woods, better known as Tea Cake, strolls in. Their meeting is brief and lighthearted. He jokes with her and makes her laugh, something rare in Janie's recent life. Unlike other men who approach her with arrogance or intentions, Tea Cake treats her with warmth and ease. He doesn't know her history or status, and she finds his relaxed confidence refreshing. Though their interaction is short, it leaves an impression. Janie is intrigued but cautious. The chapter marks a quiet but important moment. the beginning of a relationship that will challenge and transform Janie in ways she never expected. Under Chapter 11. Tea Cake returns. Tea Cake returns to see Janie again, and their conversations deepen. He flirts playfully but respectfully, and Janie finds herself enjoying his company. Still, she remains guarded. After years of controlling relationships, she's wary of trusting too quickly. Tea Cake doesn't push her. Instead, he listens, jokes, and talks to her as an equal. His easy manner and humor contrast sharply with Joe's rigid dominance. Janie begins to feel a spark she hasn't known in a long time. Though she tries to convince herself it's nothing serious, something about Tea Cake lingers in her thoughts. The chapter hints at a budding connection, not based on status or control, but on genuine companionship and joy. Chapter 12. Town Gossip and Janie's Reflection. As Tea Cake continues to visit Janie, the townspeople begin to gossip. They disapprove of her spending time with a younger man, especially so soon after Joe's death. Phoebe, Janie's close friend, warns her about the rumors and questions Tea Cake's intentions. Janie, however, calmly explains that she's not rushing into anything. She values her newfound freedom and won't let others dictate her choices again. She tells Phoebe that Tea Cake makes her feel like herself, not someone's possession or status symbol. Janie's reflections reveal that she's learning to trust her own judgment. Though still cautious, she feels drawn to Tea Cake's kindness and spirit. The chapter shows Janie starting to listen to her own heart. Chapter 13. Doubts and Distance. Janie decides to go to Jacksonville with Tea Cake and marry him, surprising the town. At first, things feel wonderful, full of hope and adventure. But soon after the wedding, Tea Cake disappears with Janie's money, leaving her worried and confused. She fears she's been tricked, just as others warned. Days later, Tea Cake returns, explaining he only took the money to prepare a surprise and lost some gambling. He assures Janie of his love and promises to repay her. Though Janie forgives him, doubt lingers. This chapter tests Janie's trust and marks the first major challenge in their relationship, forcing her to confront the risks of following her heart. Chapter 14. Life in the Muck. Janie and Tea Cake move to the Everglades, known as the Muck, where they find work harvesting beans. Life there is simple but vibrant. Tea Cake is well-liked and becomes part of the lively community, while Janie enjoys a new kind of freedom. For the first time, she works alongside her husband and feels a sense of equality and partnership. They laugh, dance, and spend time with friends. Janie embraces her new life, far from Eatonville's judgment and control. Though physically demanding, the Muck feels alive, full of energy, music, and shared experience. This chapter marks a joyful turning point as Janie begins to live not just with someone, but truly for herself. On Chapter 15, Jealousy and Reassurance. One day, Janie sees Tea Cake talking and laughing with a young woman named Nunky in the fields. Moments later, Nunky playfully snatches some of Tea Cake's work papers and runs off with him to retrieve them. Janie follows and finds them in what looks like a compromising situation. Hurt and furious, she confronts Tea Cake. Demanding answers, he laughs off the encounter, insisting it was nothing. Though Janie is still upset, Tea Cake reassures her of his love. Their passionate argument ends in reconciliation, showing the intensity of their emotions. The chapter explores jealousy and trust, revealing that even in love, Janie still fears losing herself or being made a fool again. Chapter 16. Faith and Identity. As the season continues, Janie observes the lives of other women around her, especially Mrs. Turner, a light-skinned woman who idolizes whiteness and disapproves of Janie's relationship with Tea Cake. Mrs. Turner believes Janie deserves someone of a higher class and tries to introduce her to her brother. Janie, however, is disturbed by Mrs. Turner's racist thinking and politely distances herself. Tea Cake, too, is frustrated by Mrs. Turner's views and later takes part in a plan to drive her and her family away. The chapter highlights the social tensions within the Black community, especially around colorism and internalized racism, while also reinforcing Janie's growing self-awareness and loyalty to Tea Cake. Chapter 17: Conflict and Control. As tensions rise in the Everglades, Tea Cake becomes increasingly possessive. After a fight breaks out in a restaurant involving Mrs. Turner's brother, Tea Cake joins others in humiliating the Turners, driving them to leave town. Later, Tea Cake and Janie argue over his jealousy. In a moment of anger, he slaps her, not out of rage, but to assert control and remind others that she belongs to him. Janie is shocked but doesn't protest. Neighbors notice and comment on her loyalty. The chapter exposes the darker side of their relationship, one rooted not only in love but in traditional power dynamics. Janie begins to see that even joy can come with compromise and pain. Chapter 18: The Hurricane. A powerful hurricane approaches the Everglades, and while some leave, Tea Cake and Janie decide to stay. As the storm hits, nature's fury overwhelms them. Wind, rain, and rising water force them to flee on foot with a friend, motorboat. They find shelter briefly, but must keep moving. During the chaos, Janie grabs onto a cow to stay afloat, only to find a rabid dog clinging to it. Tea Cake saves her, but is bitten in the process. They survive the storm and return to a devastated landscape, but something feels off. This chapter captures nature's raw power and foreshadows a tragic shift, not just in the world around them, but in their love as well. Chapter 19: Tragedy and Trial. After the hurricane, Janie and Tea Cake tried to rebuild their lives, but Tea Cake's health worsens. He becomes paranoid and erratic, symptoms of rabies from the dog bite. Janie, terrified, watches him slip away, mentally and emotionally. One day, in a fit of delusion, Tea Cake points a gun at her. Forced to protect herself, Janie shoots and kills him. Devastated, she is arrested and put on trial for his murder. Despite the tragedy, the courtroom recognizes her sorrow and the necessity of her actions. She is found not guilty. The chapter is heartbreaking. Janie loses the man she loved most, but also proves her strength in the face of unbearable loss. Chapter 20: Return and Reflection. After Tea Cake's funeral, Janie returns alone to Uttonville, the town where her journey began. She wears overalls, not mourning clothes, signaling that she is at peace with her past. The townspeople gossip, curious about where she's been and what happened, but Janie doesn't care about their opinions anymore. She reunites with Phoebe and shares the full story of her life and love with Tea Cake. Janie reflects on what she has gained, not just freedom, but wisdom, love, and a sense of self. The novel ends with Janie alone, but fulfilled, watching the horizon. She has lived, lost, and found herself, and that in the end is enough. At its core, Their Eyes Were Watching God explores the journey towards self-discovery and autonomy. Janie's 3 marriages show her evolving understanding of love, freedom, and her own identity. Through these relationships, she learns to trust herself and speak her truth. Voice and silence are key themes. Janie is silenced by Nanny, Logan, and Joe, but finds her voice with Tea Cake and fully reclaims it after his death. Her storytelling is itself an act of empowerment. Nature plays a symbolic role. The blossoming pear tree represents Janie's romantic ideals, while the hurricane reflects life's chaos and unpredictability. Hair is a powerful symbol of independence. Janie's refusal to tie it up after Joe's death marks a turning point in her self-ownership. The novel also addresses race and class, particularly through Mrs. Turner's internalized racism and the colorism within the Black community. Ultimately, the story is about a woman's quest to live on her own terms, not by society's rules, but by the truth she finds within herself. Their Eyes Were Watching God is more than a love story. It's a powerful narrative of growth, voice, and freedom. Through Janie Crawford's journey, Zora Neale Hurston gives us a rare portrayal of a Black woman claiming her own life in a world full of expectations. Janie's path isn't easy, marked by heartbreak, silence, and struggle, but she emerges with a deep sense of self. She learns that true fulfillment doesn't come from others, but from within. Hurston's lyrical prose and bold storytelling make this novel timeless. In the end, Janie doesn't just survive. She lives, loves, and finally understands who she is.